You're listening to the Radical Transformation Speaker Salon, hosted by Nicole Harlow. 4 days worth of transformational interviews, meditation, and surprises designed to rock your world and change your life. Your year of soul discovery and wild metamorphosis starts today.
Hey everyone, Nicole Harlow here, and I'm here on day 1 with Louise Androlia. Louise is a writer, inspirational speaker, life coach, artist, tarot reader, and general magic maker from the UK, and she's now based in Los Angeles. She works with clients one-on-one, in groups, and through writing, and believes in empowerment through self-awareness and self-knowledge. At age 3, her parents found her casting spells in the backseat of the car, and growing up she was, and forever will be, enraptured by magic and miracles. She's on a constant quest to honor her inner weirdo and loves teaching people how to feel their feelings. Louise is completely unapologetic about honoring her journey and claiming her experience, and she wants you to do the same. In a world where so many people are feeling overwhelmed by what to eat or how to live, she isn't the cookie-cutter version of a coach that you might conjure up. She'll show you how to get to know your mind, body, and spirit and reconnect the three and crash you with full force back into your experience. As a catalyst for positive change, Louise speaks with openness about her own past and present challenges and uses her experience to work with clients by helping them understand as much as possible about their unique balance. She guides her clients to rediscover and reclaim their personal power by helping them to reconnect their mind, body, and spirit. She's always been highly intuitive, and her ability to tune into the guidance that a client needs is unique and successful. At 21, Louise became seriously ill with a chronic pain condition. She gave up her life as she knew it. Feeling failed by the healthcare system, she turned to alternative healing methods, which felt natural. Over the next 5 years, she recovered from her physical illness and PTSD via a diet change, a combination of holistic therapies, and a shift in perception. Once better, Louise ran a celebrated handmade lingerie business for 5 years and still continues to make art and collaborate creatively with enchanting friends around the globe. 13 years on from the start of her healing journey, Louise sees her journey as a gift so that she could guide others to know that they are never alone on their journey. Her experiences caused her to break down and crack open a new way of living and thinking. She learned to proceed with a holistic and spiritual outlook, and now helps others to do the same via practical and inspirational coaching and guidance. She uses the experience that she's overcome as the energy to encourage others that they can do the same. As an energy expert, Louise regularly runs an energy awareness workshop, an inspiring lesson teaching you how to avoid taking on other people's energies and how to protect and clear your space when you do. Her blog features regular posts offering guidance and inspiration so you feel supported in making change. As a speaker, Louise unites groups of people together to break through their fears and feel empowered to move on with their journey. She writes celebrated monthly tarot forecasts for the Numinous and Mademoiselle Robot and a regular column at Live the Process, which is actually where I found Louise through a magazine, and then I started reading her tarot forecasts, which I love. Her most recent endeavor is the launch of As Above, So Below, a modern-day talisman jewelry collection in collaboration with Jessica DeLotz. And she's available for one-on-one consults, article commissions, and as a speaker for events. So if you want to find out more about Louise, you can find her at Louise Androlia, that's ANDROLIA.com. And you can find all the ways to work with Louise and where you can also find her tarot scopes. So onto the interview, you can see that we jumped right in to talking about tarot, obviously, which we're both a big fan of, and also teaching and diving into some really juicy stuff about fear and anxiety and really lovingly honoring your inner weirdo, as Louise so beautifully puts it. So let's get started. You piqued my interest when you said that you're not a planner. As someone who is an intense planner, I'd just like to hear your perspective about like what does that mean to you, like to be the opposite of a planner? Like how do you make decisions? You know, are you very just intuitive or?
I suppose it's a big concept, I guess. But when I say I'm not a planner, I say that I'm not. I wouldn't, you know, in terms of how our different minds work. I guess like I'm not a structured person. So I think that comes like, for instance, I've never really worked for anyone except myself. So I've never really ever had a deadline.
Right.
I had to be somewhere, you know, like most things have been directed by me. Like the only thing I really have a deadline for is, you know, the tarot scopes that I write, that, you know, I've got to do those for each month. And each week I've got those things. But I don't, I suppose I've always been, maybe as a young girl I was a bit more stressed about it, but I'm very, you know, if you could use that annoying term, go with the flow. Like I don't get stressed by change.
Yeah.
I don't get stressed if something doesn't go how I think it's going to go, because I trust so much in my surrender practice and kind of divine timing, as it were. So it's interesting because I think, you know, and my mind is very visual. You know, I kind of see things as opposed to making lists. So it's that, I think it's just that different type of way that we all work. So at the moment it's quite interesting because I'm trying to start writing a book and plan some online courses, which for me, with that kind of mind, is really tough, because I'm like, oh, these things require an actual plan.
Yes,
you know, like a structure, and you know, and I'm a plan, and I'm like, oh, I actually have no idea how to do that. You know, it's not like I can't do it, because I'll be able to do it, but it's not the thing that comes naturally to me. So you know, it's my kind of current learning thing, because I think really we need a mixture of the both. You know, I think we need to be able to be organised and get things done, but at the same time be in a constant state of surrender, where we don't freak out if our list or our plan doesn't get executed how we think it should.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, hopefully I'll just be able to bring in these kind of structured skills, and they'll work perfectly alongside my non-planning. But you know, yeah, you know, and I am very intuitive. You know, I lead everything by how I feel. So
yeah,
I'm not a thinker. You know, I'm not anymore anyway. You know, not after all the work I've done on myself and things that I've experienced. You know, I'm not someone. I don't sit getting, you know, whirring thoughts in my head. It's not something that really exists for me, which is nice.
Oh yeah.
Very nice. You know, I'm not a kind of. I don't have that kind of headspace that's panicked. But so it's just now just learning to use the kind of useful headspace in a structured manner.
Yeah.
I keep being like, I need to kind of channel all my Virgo friends. I'm good at getting stuff done. So I'm not like, what would Gala do in this situation? What would Florence Kim do right now? Like, and I imagine what they would do, and I do it. So I'm like, they would be able to get this thing planned out.
That's exactly. I love that you brought up Virgo too, because it's totally like such the Virgo thing to be like hyper organized and really like left brained and, you know, list making and stuff. I'm really just so different, quite the opposite of everything that you said, and it's really something that I'm trying to bring a bit more of into my life, both being guided by intuition rather than what my default is. My default has served me well in my life, like the default being like, sit down and think it through. You've got the brain for it, think it through. Like, so I'm, you know, I tend to be the one with like, I'm not so anal or OCD that I have like that things have to go to plan. There's definitely flexibility there for sure, and I'm quite fluid in that I do allow myself to, you know, go with the flow, quote unquote, but I'm very good at just like getting the paper out and mapping the whole thing out. Like I can see it that way, but I'm not very visual. I've never really been very visual, but I think that for me, it's probably because not the visual thing, but my ability to be able to be a good planner, I think is because I'm right on the cusp of Taurus and Gemini, and for the most part, I feel more like Gemini, like on a day-to-day basis. But there's enough Turian energy in there to like ground down, so I'm not like off into the ether. I'm not like away with the fairies or anything like that Taurian energy, like, brings down the, like, pen and paper, write it out, and the next thing you know, it's like the course is like, whatever it is, whether it's like life plans, like even now, I don't know where I'll be like in the next month, like after I get back from America. Will we be here in Malta? Will we be moving somewhere else? Like, who knows? But I could easily just like graph out a whole chart about the potential. Yeah, there is unknowns, but I could easily like chart out all of the like the different choices and the pros and cons of all of them.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's good. It's just, you know, it really is how our different minds work. You know, that kind of, because I'm, inherently I'm an artist, so my brain is visual, and I see the thing with me, I think, why I struggle with kind of structure, or why I don't perhaps like it, and I'm learning to like it, is because I can always see the finished result straight away. So I see something and then I have to work backwards, which I find frustrating because then it makes me want the thing straight away. Yeah. So like, be a fashion designer, so in my head, I would see the product and then I would have to go completely back to the beginning where I had to make the pattern, you know? So,
right, yeah.
But I have I know exactly what it looked like, straight away. So it's like I can see a project finished and then I go back, but I'm like, oh, I can see it though. It's just there. Going back to get it, but it's great, because I think what we really, I really believe that clarity, is a perfect, like when we have clarity on anything, it's because we've got a perfect meeting of our intuition and our mind, and they've joined together, and then we're clear. Like I don't think we can survive just in either one. If we're just in our head or we're just in our intuition, we're kind of missing something. It's like that middle point where you're able to use both to their best, that you get kind of that clearness where you can like see how to do something, because you're like, oh yeah, I'm using my mind for all its good things, my intuition for all its good things. You're not just like either kind of stuck in a daydream or stuck in your headspace. They're kind of merged together and it's like, oh bam, that's it. Whichever one we naturally, in terms of my astrology, I've my rising sign is Taurus, and it's really the only earth sign. It's really the only kind of useful in terms of practicality thing in my whole chart, because my chart's very it's all watery, it's all psychic, and it's kind of away with fairies.
Scorpio and Pisces, right? Were the other two? Yeah, I saw that and I was like, oh yeah, because I love it's one of the first things I want to know about people, and if they have that information like to hand, it's like so much better. It's just like, no, but what are you like? What's your rising sign? What's your moon sign?
Scorpio sun, Pisces moon, but Pisces moon in the 12th house. Then all my other signs are Scorpio, Libra, Sagittarius. Everything else is in Scorpio, Libra, or Sagittarius, apart from my rising sign. So, and pretty much everything's in the 6th house. So it's all, health and healing and being of service. But then I've got a Taurus, which I'm like, this is the thing that makes, which is why all my work, I'm very, like the way I, work with clients and the way I write and the way I teach is very practical. And I'm not at all interested in taking people to the fairy space. I'm like, magic is real. I was like, this is how you put this stuff into daily life. Because, my worst nightmare is that anybody rejects the material world, which a lot of people do. They want to go up into their kind of spiritual space. I'm like, no, we're living here.
Right, yeah, I very much agree with you.
Do our work, and this is where I need to be. So actually we need to be able to, use the kind of maybe spiritual beliefs that we have to, infuse into our daily life. So that's kind of something that I'm very good at, is explaining anything that maybe some people would think is kind of, weird, or I can explain it to anybody and they'll get it, even just like a random person in the street. I'm like, I can explain this and they will understand it. So that's what I like to do, that kind of practical. But me as a person, I'm not practical. Practical. I am a loose cannon, but everything else is very structured.
So did you say the Taurus shows up in your career house?
No, Taurus is my rising sign. I don't know what, I can't remember offhand what
But the rising sign is like how you kind of display to the world.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Correct?
So,
Okay.
see, most people think of me as someone that's really practical.
Right.
When I tell people I'm like not very structured or anything, they're usually quite surprised. They're like, "What? You're always doing stuff." I'm like, "Yeah, I can do stuff." And I'm like, I'm not sitting, making a list or making a plan or anything practical. And I'm like, "Yeah, it's so practical." I'm like, I've like learned how to be practical.
Yeah. And maybe that's part of it as well, because just hearing you say that, it just reminds me that my rising sign is a Libra. And one of the things that I hear the most, the feedback I get the most from people is, you're so balanced. You're so balanced. How can you be so balanced? That's what I hear the most. But my answer to that is what you just said. It's like, that's not what I feel like inside of my head or inside of my body. Yeah. Balance is something that I am very rarely at that place of homeostasis where things are not in flux for me. Yeah. But I've learned how to be balanced and how to show that to the world. Not that it's a false facade. It is a part of me, but it's not the whole. It's not the whole story.
Navigate as well.
Yeah. That for me is the best. It's the best way that I've learned to navigate my world and my business and at school. Was to always be like the balancer and the one that does have like the presence, the person who's the counselor and is like helping people through their problems and being diplomatic. Those are qualities that I know are true for myself, but they don't always feel that way underneath the surface.
Yeah, I think, that's the thing, like the way we feel in our own mind is so unique to us, it's not even something you can ever really explain. And obviously that's why, we go through such different things, because we're trying to kind of decipher that kind of feeling versus what we're putting out to the world versus, what we can teach people, all these different things.
Yeah.
And generally why, everybody feels alone is because, there's this kind of thought that no one else could possibly be kind of thinking the way you're thinking.
Right. Yeah. I've found it tremendously interesting getting my, reading my chart and finding out the placements of the planets. And I found Leo is my moon sign. And it actually shows up in my chart in my career house, which when I read it was just made so much sense, because I feel in my heart, I feel like an introvert, and maybe an extroverted introvert or an extrovert situationally, but I love my alone time. I love reading my books. I love being by myself. And I'm not always energized by the presence of other people. In fact, I feel depleted a lot of the time. Yeah. And, but the career that I've chosen is so I've been an entrepreneur for 8 years, and the first business I ever started was, a burlesque studio, and doing not performing, but doing classes for female sexuality, empowerment, women's circles, and then it moved on to teaching yoga after that. And I've always loved dancing. And so in my career, I am totally happy to be in the center. But as soon as I get home, it's okay, don't call me, don't text me for 3 days now. I'm just going to be reading my book.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I actually just about a month or so ago got a Vedic astrology reading, which Eastern astrology, and I didn't know anything about Eastern astrology, and it was wild. It was way more accurate than anything I've ever discovered in Western. It was I would so recommend it just for exploring. So, I mean, it's completely different. You can't really compare the two. It also is very complicated. I really had no understanding of what was, how it worked, because it's, the girl I had it with, she was in India for 12 years studying it, all these things. But it was, it's very kind of, it's much more, I think, it's very date specific,
okay.
So and it's working with a lot of the different stars, but in just such a different way. But I was whoa, the kind of I think in India, she was telling me they, it's used very specifically, and it's used a lot, for Ayurvedic practices,
right,
Ayurvedic health systems. But, you know, she was like, in terms of like prediction, whilst, you know, she's on the same wavelength as me, as, you know, the future being fluid, is that she was like, out of anything, you know, Vedic astrology is kind of the most kind of accurate anything could be. But like in India, people will, you know, come and they'll be like, they want to know the date they're going to get married, you know, like these specific things. And she's like, well, you know, but you can actually give, you know, you can offer these possible dates and they might be similar. But, you know, I got her to look into my past, you know, and you know, because I specifically want, you know, I was chronically ill for half of my 20s, and I was interested in what was kind of happening, you know, in the stars around that time. You know, and it was very interesting. She was able to be like, oh, you had like this star was sitting right on top of your sign, and this star represents poison. And she, you know, she basically described kind of the types of things that would have happened, and you know, she didn't know anything about me. And I was like, okay, weird. Wow. I was like, that's very specifically exactly how things were. So it's very interesting to be able to go to the past and be like, oh, that's what was happening at that point.
Yeah, I just wrote that down because this has actually come up twice. So it's a reminder to me that it's something that I want to do and get done.
Yeah, forward you the email of the girl that I had it with.
Yes, please. Yeah.
She was amazing. But yeah, it's just interesting as a different viewpoint, you know. If I ever get a reading, to me it's just like, okay, this is something that's just new and interesting, and to see how things are. But yeah, I would definitely recommend it, just even especially when you know your Western astrology so well, just to kind of see the differences.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely gonna do it. I'm actually excited because I'm just about to pop out. I'm like excited that Saturn is popping out of Scorpio in a few days, because that feels like the tail end of my Saturn return. And,
that was your Saturn return.
Yeah. And so it popped out and then it popped back in again. And when it had popped out before, I didn't know that it was going to pop back in again. And I was kind of like, I feel it. Like, I'm out of it now. I got all this like freedom and life feels a lot more fluid. And then I really felt it when it popped back in again. And I've actually just been doing some energy work to kind of clear up anything that's come up in the past 2.5 years, because it's been a really wild ride for me energetically, as it is for most people. But yeah, I'm gonna celebrate.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm gonna celebrate on like the night when it pops out again, and just be like, yes, womanhood.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I mean, I've noticed it, because my Saturn return was in Libra, and then it was immediately followed by Saturn in Scorpio, which is my sign. So I've really felt Saturn for 6 years.
Yeah.
I'm ready to pass it on to Sagittarius.
Yeah, me too. I can't wait. I'm like, okay, done. And what was really cool was like, I just there were some issues that came up over that 2.5 year period that I can you hear the marching band now?
Yes.
It's like the background of our call. They just go around the streets, like around and around, and I think they've come back around to my block again. Yeah. But anyway, there was like some issues that came up over the 2.5 years that I hadn't really addressed, especially not in an energetic way. And I just picked, a few weeks ago, I randomly ran into someone we live in this teeny tiny village here in Malta. There's an English woman that does something called theta healing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which I'd never done before. And it was just, I loved it. It's so, we wound up working through it's, what I loved about it is it's so permission based. Everything so she's working with source energy and basically getting to the root of your belief system. Just different beliefs that maybe aren't serving you anymore. And she asks you, is it okay for me to reprogram this? Is it okay? Nice. And what was cool about it is, there were places, where I said no. It's okay. That's the thing. It's not about her just going in and turning things on and off as she sees fit. She's asking you, do you want to change this or not? If not, then we go a bit further. An example was she had asked me, do you want to reprogram the belief, I would rather be happy than right? And immediately I was like, no. Well, why? Why? Why would you rather be right than happy? Which then opened up a whole new dialogue, which was like, wow, well, I immediately said no because, like, I want to be right. Okay, so why do you want to be right? Well, I want to be right because, like, which eventually, like, through inquiry got back to this place of, like, oh, I need to be right because I came from a really bad neighborhood and I was, like, one of the only kids to get out, and I got out because I was intelligent and I did well at school. So for me, like, success and not going back to that place means, like, you always have to be right.
Yeah.
Because if you're wrong, then you get chucked back, like, where you came from, like, they'll see you as a fraud and say, you're not supposed to be here. You were wrong. Like, so I would rather be right than happy. So we did eventually, like, work through that belief, but it's amazing. I like the inquiry process and the questioning because it gives you an opportunity to say, no.
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
It's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
And then, you give a chance to work through it. I mean, I something I work on with my clients and myself, and it's kind of from what you were just saying there, like a lot of blocks that we might have in ourselves that are actually to do with the way that we have attached something to a certain word, attaching something to the word right, which means this big thing, and it's like we have these certain words we use and we've kind of, in our own internal dictionary, we're attached to that word, and actually, a lot of our things that can really help us are kind of going into that internal dictionary and being like, okay, let's reinterpret this word into something that's kind of more expansive and we can, work with a little bit more, and also just seeing, like, certain, even just with that really kind of, I say basic concept, it's far from basic, but, how a lot of people struggle with the word God because they will maybe just associate it with a certain religion that they don't like. Whereas kind of breaking it down to kind of realize that you can, like, God can mean whatever you want it to mean, just like you see these different words and, like, sometimes you can even notice in your own mind when you hear something, what is the kind of negative attachment I have to that word and how can I, reinterpret it so I'm not using it against me.
Yeah, or love, it's like love for someone is like, oh, my kids. Another person's like snuggling and watching Netflix, and then the third person it's like pain and rejection.
Yeah. It's one of the biggest things. So it's kind of going in being like, oh yeah, why don't you want this?
So I had found you the first time that I found your work was in Proud House magazine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah, that was the first time I saw you. And then it read, I think it was like an interview with you. And then it came up again in the Numinous, I think was the next time. And that was when I was reading, like, the tarot scopes and stuff. But yeah, it was random. It was like, I remember that one day just coming across that magazine. And also, I think that's when it's the same magazine that I found the girls who did Be Here Now-ish, the little web series. So I found so much good stuff from that one article. Yeah, oh man, they're so cool.
I just was an extra in the Be Here Now-ish season 2, so that was really fun.
Oh, sweet.
I don't know when it's coming out, but they're just amazing women.
Yeah, I'm really inspired by both of them. But
yeah, I think Prowl House, I did a video interview with them for, like, energy protection, and then I've done some tarot, but Lisa, who does the magazine, she's also amazing, like, doing amazing work.
Yeah, no, I really like her a lot too. So it was just making me think of, like, I was trying to think, where did I first come across your work? And then I was thinking about, like, the tarot scopes, and I was just curious if, like, is tarot the first thing that you go to when you need clarity in your life, or is there another practice that you'd say, like, trumps that, and then the tarot are just supplementary?
I mean, the way I use tarot now, like, in my daily life as a form of self-help, I really believe that the tarot is the tarot is basically your subconscious. So when you use the cards, it's kind of the contents of you laid out in front of you.
Yeah.
So it can kind of, you know, remind you of what you already know, I believe.
Yeah.
The main thing for me is that I really do base everything on feelings. So everything that runs by me is run through my body. So, my biggest kind of practice is what I call feeling feelings. Teach people how to feel feelings, which is kind of a filtered down thing from what I got taught when I had post-traumatic stress over 10 years ago, just allowing the kind of, body and mind to work together to process things, but, really just discovering that your feelings are the direct link to everything. They directly link you to your intuition. You can really feel your way through life. It's like when you have a decision to make, feel that decision, because your body will tell you. Your body will tell you. If you sit with two different options, I don't believe there's such thing as a wrong decision, because everything will take you somewhere, but it's a common thing that people have a real problem with, is this fear of making the wrong decision, right?
Yeah.
Or, it's something that comes up a lot for my clients. And I'm like, you can sit, say you're kind of like, say I was deciding where I wanted to move, and I was like, you can sit down alone and say out loud the thing, the possible options, but as if you're going to do them, so say I was like, I'm going to move to Paris. My body would very quickly recoil. It would do something, because I don't want to move to Paris, right?
Yeah.
If I say that out loud, my body's like, no. I'm going to move to LA. I would get, I might get a rush of anxiety or something, but the feeling would be expansive. Your body will respond. Your body responds often just a fraction before your mind chimes in with all the kind of fears and the nonsense. So it's amazing how you can really feel your way through life. You can, to get to this point where, for me, it's very instant. I'm like, does this feel good? No, bam, not going to do that. Does that feel good? Yes. And I kind of, in terms of making decisions, if someone's offering me to do something, I'm like, does it feel good? Yes. If it doesn't, then it's a no. And I trust that, because I've been using that process for so long. And I suppose, intuitively I've been, on a kind of on par with my intuition since I was a little girl. So it's very natural for me to trust my feelings. I haven't really had to fight that, which I know people have to go through that process first. But, in terms of tarot, I've had tarot for over half my life, and I've used it. I definitely had that thing in the beginning where, I had the kind of, the concept of using it a bit more like fortune telling, like a lot of people really believe, So, but it didn't really get me anywhere, because, it doesn't really help you if you use tarot like that, because you just end up, getting out of your body, and you're disconnected from the present moment. And then eventually, I really, realised, oh, okay, this is something this is me. Your tarot deck is you. So now, I might, if I'm feeling stuck in particular, or maybe I'm feeling anxious, or I'm depressed, or just worried about something, I can take that feeling to my table and just ask a simple question like, what could help me right now? What do I need right now? And I might pull over a card, and I like to read, the tarot cards are so in-depth, and you can study them forever and still not get to the bottom of them. But at the same time, you can reduce each card down to one word or one sentence, so it might be that you're like, oh, okay, what do I need right now? And you pull out, the temperance card, which is just going to indicate, a kind of, needing more self-care. And it's just in that moment where you're just like, oh, I just need to look after myself. And and it's like, that's the simple guidance. So it's just there to kind of remind me of something. So, I also see them as these, they're kind of like keys to unlock parts of yourself. So instead of trying to predict something, you can be like, okay, I'm stressed about this. What might help me right now? Or what's the thing that's holding me back? And the card comes up and it's representing your kind of a specific fear. And you're like, oh yeah, that is the fear I'm having. So it should always be this process that reminds you of what you already know. And I really, I'm very specific with, to a point of kind of almost bullying, my kind of worst nightmare is that people are outside their body searching for answers, because I'm like, we really can find everything, within us. We can use all forms of guidance to go back to ourselves. Of course, we need help from external sources, but that external source should also guide us back to trusting ourselves. So, when I, work with clients, I'm like, everything that I'm teaching them or sharing with them, is a concept that's going to lead them back to their body and mind being a safe place. So actually getting back in, so it's like, okay, so that we become less and less likely to be like, I would say the human danger word is should. What should I do? Mm-hmm. Should I do this? Because a should it's a step outside the body, whereas a feeling is connected completely to you. Mm-hmm. So it's like often, I'm sure as well, when you're in a bit of a stressful space, you get into that should space and you're like, should I? What should I do? Should. And it becomes this, we're worrying too much about what someone else might think. And we're kind of, outside of that space. But it's like, whenever you're in that space, if you always take it back to the body, if you go back to a feeling, you'll get the answer. It may not be the answer that you think you want, or the the one that you should do, but your feelings will tell you the kind of real truth. And then I really believe it's basically a practice of building that up. So now, I really trust my feelings. I know that, like, if I, from a tried and tested perspective, is if I lead my life directed by, a desire to feel good. I say that's pretty much the only kind of rule I have in my life, is to want to feel good. Yeah. And, to move forward based on that, then it things are better. I'm happier, I'm more abundant, I'm more peaceful, all those things. It's when I go against my feelings, I'm like, oh yeah, that's because I went against my feelings. Mm-hmm. And it's, it's what I think of as the intuition. It's the feelings are just, your body knows.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a long-winded answer.
No, I loved it. I very much agree with everything that you said, and it really reflects my own experience of, just like you, I've had tarot cards in my life for about half of my life, and they've always, gone everywhere with me, traveled everywhere with me, and I started out in a very similar way in that they were more kind of fortune telling, and like, and what's going to happen here? And what about this guy? Or
Yeah.
Whereas now they're just a clear reflection for me about my internal barometer about something. Even there's so much, like, now, when I want I can see myself wanting a certain outcome, and a card comes up and I'm like, oh, disappointed. And it's like, okay, explore that. Like, why are you disappointed that card came up? Like, and not something else, So I very much use them, like, as a psychological tool, and, just getting into my own, my own barometer of my feelings. Yeah, so I couldn't agree more with what you just said.
That's the great thing about, self-help in general, or anything like, astrology and tarot. I was discussing this concept with a client recently who, she had noted that she'd got into a bit of a negative space with astrology because she found herself kind of reading, then feeling like, oh, I have to wait until that date to do this thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, if anything, anything that's kind of self-help or spiritual, if anything makes you feel disempowered, then it's not for you, or it's not being used in the correct way. Mm-hmm. Because you should never feel disempowered by something that's for your own kind of, evolving spirit. So I was like, maybe take a break from astrology right now, because you can see that it was it was actually giving her fear from doing things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Whereas I was like, it should only be something that, benefits you. So it's like, we should look to our astrological chart to understand a little bit more about ourselves. But the thing we shouldn't do is be like, it's like kind of what we were discussing earlier. I'm like, oh yeah, this Taurus, seems to be the only practical thing in my chart, but it doesn't mean I can't be practical. It's
right.
Like, if we're in this space where we're like, oh, I can't do that because I'm a Scorpio,
Yeah.
No, that's using it as kind of something disempowering and an excuse. You can be like, oh yeah, I really resonate with these things as a Scorpio, but I can still do that thing. You have to still work it. Or I was like, if you really study your chart, I was like, you would see that a date that is on just a random monthly forecast is not going to apply to every, Scorpio in the whole world, is it?
Right.
Because, you might study your chart with an astrologer and be like, I'm going to release a book or a project. What would be a great date to put it out to the world,
Yeah.
And you're using it kind of an empowered thing alongside what you're already doing, but you're not like, oh, I can't, it's like the whole Saturn thing. It's like, we're glad for it to go because it's been testing. But, the whole point of Saturn Return and Saturn is that it's trying to force you into your best self and to take action.
Yeah.
So if we were like, oh, I can't do anything for 2.5 years because I've got Saturn Return, it would be defeating the whole point of the Saturn Return, which is to take empowerment over your life and to, get kind of kick yourself in the ass.
Yeah.
So, I just really believe that we've got to actually, and it's the same with people we resonate with, or, we're listening to speakers, or we're reading self-help books or anything like that. Like, you have to take what resonates with you and leave the rest, because that, it's all about building your own toolbox, discovering what works for you, and it may not be what works for your best friend or that person you've seen on the internet, raving about something. It's kind of, really taking in information and then going, oh yeah, that's exactly what I already know, because we do know everything underneath. We're just uncovering it with kind of a brush, and just being like, oh yeah. And so I always say that the things you resonate with are just the things that you actually already knew.
Yeah.
And you're actually just suddenly going like, oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. You feel it in your body. You feel like, this is already there.
And it's why, you'll resonate with certain teachers or just people in general, is because they'll just be speaking the language that you can understand. And, I love it. I don't really, I'm not a self-help junkie at all, and never have been. But I love it when if I go to a conference or something, and I sit there and I'm like, it's so awesome because everybody is saying the exact same thing. The same message, but it's just packaged up in these different ways. And that's because we all need a different person to help us, so someone in the audience is like, I don't resonate with any of this, but then the next person comes on, they're like, bam, you've got me, and it's
got
the
it,
same thing, it's just in a different way. So it's, and that's why it's so fun, and that's why you find certain people and you're like, oh yeah, and why we shouldn't put restrictions on ourselves as self-help, because I've definitely come across people who are like, in a bit of a state of panic because their friend has like told them that this book has changed their life and they should do this thing, and then they've tried it and it's not helped them, and it's like, well, that's just not for you. Your thing is something different, and that's cool.
I'm reading. I love when because I try to read a lot of books and hear the message from different people to see what they're talking about, and for the most part it's coming down to the same sort of message. I like when I just read something that kind of hits me from a different direction. It's wow, I haven't experienced it in that way. And that for me right now is I'm reading a book called Wild Feminine. And it's all about, it's this pelvic care practitioner who lives in Portland. And I actually bought the book just thinking it was going to be about reclaiming your wild feminine, so maybe some meditation practices, but it actually goes quite deep into the physical. So she's talking about making a vaginal map, so just not just a vaginal map, but also a vaginal map and a vaginal timeline. So the map is actually kind of feeling around in there and seeing where do you have trigger points, where, what needs to be massaged, and even down to she goes over the different quadrants of the pelvic floor muscles and what they pertain to. So for example, the posterior muscles would be support. And if you find that they're really tight or they don't release or you don't have any strength in them, it could be around supporting. And then the left ovary is I don't know, receiving, and then the right one, I can't remember all of them, but it was it just hit me as, oh wow, this is something I think I know a lot about my vagina and my lady parts and stuff, but this is a new thing for me. It's not just the same old message, and the core underneath of it, the practice was different, I guess I should say. It went beyond just okay, sit in a corner and meditate on your divine femininity, which is wonderful. But this was okay, here, draw a picture and make a map of your vaginal landscape and how that pertains to energy that you might be storing. And so when you're talking, because this is very fresh in my mind, when you were talking about intuition and feeling your feelings and all of that stuff, it's just reminding me that reading this book has brought me right down into my pelvic bowl. And when I the last few days since I've been really in this book, it's every decision, everything that I ask myself throughout the day, I'm bringing it down to my pelvic bowl and being how does the deep core of me feel in this moment? It's really good. It just and I'm someone who Ayurvedic doshas of Vata. I'm like 5'10", and I feel very disconnected from the core of me. Like it feels like I've got a really long torso and it feels like it's really far away. So any kind of practice that brings me into that pelvic bowl or down into the lower part of my body is really well received by me. Because I feel like I spend a lot of my energy as just like from my heart up and out of my head. Yeah, and I need someone to shove it down again. It's just like
push it on myself. It's kind of that working with the chakras and everything. But it is, so it's so exciting when you read a book and you're like, whoa, this is coming at me in a new way, and I totally get this, and it's a different way for me to work. The books I'm reading a book called Walking the Tiger at the moment by Peter Levine, I think it is. It's a book about trauma, and I have a great interest in trauma because I had PTSD. But it's actually the thing that's taught me it's kind of taught me everything, and the way that he speaks about it, he's talking a lot about trauma and how animals, like animals in the wild, they experience traumatic things all the time, but they don't get PTSD. So it's like it's kind of, it's a lot of it studying, what animals do that's different, or what they have in place that we don't have in place.
Right.
But actually reading the book, everything that he's saying, I was like, all the things that my body has taught me, and somebody's written it down, and I'm like, oh, this is so amazing, and it's, this great guy, the study that he's done, and I've just been reading it, and I'm like, oh, it's a book that I'm like, oh, I can feel happy to share this with any clients, and I'm sitting reading it with a smile on my face, and I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant, and so I always like reading anything about trauma. That's like an area that I find extremely interesting, because it really taps into that concept of the body and feeling things to be able to process them. So that's kind of what I'm reading at the moment. I'm like, it's funny. So I'm reading a book about trauma, but I'm like smiling the whole time. So I'm like,
yeah. No, I understand that sometimes, and it just hits you and it feels good in your heart, because you're just like, this feels true for me.
Yeah, it's helpful, I'm like, oh, I wish I'd have had this book 10 years ago. But now, it gets to still provide a source of healing for me on a deeper level, and gives me extra tools to share with others. So it's pretty cool.
What was something that you would say for you was really helpful to help move you beyond being ruled by fear?
I think I know that the most important thing we can do with our fears is get to know them. Because, and it's the whole, it's again, it comes back to feeling feelings, but what we naturally do is that there's two things. We tend to, one, we don't want to feel anything that's negative. So anger, especially all the icky ones, jealousy, anger, like anxiety, anything that's really uncomfortable, that's really fear-based feelings. We don't really want to feel them. They're not things we like to have in our body. So we tend to try and kind of, we shove them in a drawer, we distract ourselves, we push them out the window, we push them away from ourselves subconsciously, which means that fear itself becomes something that we're afraid of, right? So it's like, things that we're afraid of in our own mind are like these big hovering monsters behind us that can kind of attack us at any point. So, that's something that we really do, is kind of like, we neglect to feel those things. And the other thing that we tend to do with fears is we often use them as labels, like, I am scared, I am angry, I am anxious, and we pop them on us like a sticker. And then again, we're kind of embodying the fear rather than feeling it. So the thing that's really helpful as well to know is that there's nobody that's exempt from fear, right? That's something that people can get really stuck with, is having this vision that there's other people that are just like, fine, with no cares in the world. And it's like, oh no, everyone has fears. It's just a difference whether you know how to manage them or not.
Yeah.
So, I love this idea that you can think of fear as an acquaintance, so for instance, you know, that person you walk past in the street and you say hi to them, you wave across the road, but you don't go and chat to them because, you know, they're just someone you kind of acknowledge and say hi to, right? So if you think of your fears like that, you want to, and a really simple kind of exercise is that you can actually just, you know, whether it's in meditation or just sitting, you know, you can actually just be like, okay, fear right now, you know, I've got a fear of failure, you know, that's the thing that's coming up for me. And it's like, okay, how about I just say hello to this fear of failure, you know, and it helps maybe if you even visualize it. You know, I've had clients that kind of, you know, they see their fears like Harry Potter dementors, you know, hovering black things. You know, for me, I kind of I think of my mind, you know, that source of fear a bit like a waiting room, and I'm like, they're just people sat in chairs around me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, there's my fear of failure over there in the corner. Hey, what's up? You know, but I'm now busy doing something else, because if you acknowledge all your fears, like, well, yeah, I've got a fear of failure. Like I'm feeling that now. You know, I'm afraid of this happening. You kind of acknowledge all of them. You're basically bringing them into the present moment, and then they are less able to bother you because you know what they are. You know, and then from that point, you can individually go and work with them. You know, so it's like, oh, today I'm actually going to go and really have a chat with my fear of failure and think about it. You know, it's basic. I call it empowering your fears. So it can get to going to be, you know, terrifying for us. But if you know them, then they're less likely to surprise you, because you're just like, oh, yeah, I know you. Like, and to me, I'm like, I see you there. You know, I see you over there, fear of something or other. You know, okay. And you're giving them credit, you know, because that's the thing, is like any part of ourselves that we disown is going to come and kind of bite us in the ass, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's anything that we shove down. And it's why, you know, it's good as well to recognize on your own personal journey is that there are these times when, you know, and you know, actually that, going back to astrology, that Saturn Return is a good example of it, where it's like, you know, I always say that Saturn Return is like a washing machine cycle where all your dirt gets spun out. And it's like everything will be unearthed and come to, you know, it's like your doorbell rings and you open it and you're like, oh God, you know, and it's like to recognize that there are points in your life where it might feel like you're overwhelmed with your own fear.
Yeah.
To be like, for you to work with. So it's actually like, you know, these things haven't come up to haunt you. They haven't come up to like be mean to you. They've come up because you're in a position to be able to work with them. And to me, that's like an empowering way of looking at fears. It's like, okay, if I'm right now really struggling with a fear that, you know, no one will ever love me, or a fear that I'm not good enough for this thing, you know, if that's coming up for me, then I'm like, okay, it's there to work with. It's not coming up to punish me, you know, or it doesn't mean I'm going backwards just because it might be an old fear. It's like, okay, it's now aligned to work with. So it's actually this very subtle thing of being like, oh yeah, just, you know, even if you just have that visual of just being like, hello, you know, like, I see you, fear of commitment. There you are.
Yeah, hanging out.
You know, because then that gives you this, you know, just gives you this pivotal point to then work with yourself more. Whereas when we're in that space where we're like hiding our fears, or we're you know, the other thing that is so common for us to do is to not value our feelings or fears. So, you know, we have something and we're like, you know, I'm feeling this, or I'm afraid of this, and then we immediately follow it like, oh, but I shouldn't feel that. You know, we kind of tell ourselves off for the thing that we're feeling.
Yeah.
And that is an immediate block to us being able to feel better, because we basically said, oh, I'm feeling scared. Oh, you're an idiot for feeling scared. And you're just, it's like immediately a backwards arrow back into a spinning circle, whereas it's actually, you know, we have to really, you know, all our feelings of value, and you know, something you can do with that kind of feelings is to be like, oh, I feel, you know, anxious, you know, which is a big one, right? You know, I'm also have a real passion for helping people with anxiety and panic, because I've had it in so many chronic forms, and now I'm, you know, anxiety free pretty much. Or if I get anxious, I know exactly what to do with it. So I'm like, well, if I've had it in these crazy forms and I'm okay, then that means other people can be too. But I realise that with anxiety, it's the thing that nobody wants to feel, right? Because it's, you know, no one wants to feel a panic attack because it's terrifying.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So, whereas actually the best thing to do when you feel anxious is to feel it, because it will disperse through you much quicker. Your body will do its thing. You'll get more clarity. And so it's like, even if you just notice that you're anxious, you can just say, I feel anxious, and it's okay. So you're saying I feel, which immediately pulls the kind of thought into your body, and following it with, and it's okay. And you can do that with anything, I feel angry, and it's okay. I feel irritated, and it's okay. I feel jealous, and it's okay. You bring in that kind of it's okay mantra, which immediately is you valuing the feeling, and even if it's something that you don't really believe to start with, just by saying it, you're actually going, oh yeah. Because you're empowering your feeling, like, oh, it's my anxiety. It's okay for me to have the anxiety, just because I might feel stupid, and all these things. But it's just being like, it's okay, because then you've got it kind of with you to then work with. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But that's those things that stuff that I practice on a daily basis. And it's like, of course I'm not free of fears, but and like you said, your kind of particular question, how can we not, how can we move away from kind of living fearfully or choosing fear,
being
all the time?
ruled by it.
Is actually to get to know them, because then what you've given yourself is you've brought your fear into the present moment. You know what it looks like, and in that point you have an option to then look for something else, or depending on your spiritual practice, you might pray for a different option. You might then, you might be like, okay, this is what I'm afraid of, and please help me see this differently, or it might be, this is what's happening, but I believe there's another way to look at this, or I choose to not be directed by that fear. I just see it, and something that also really helps when you have a lot of fear is to fill up what I call your spirit bucket, because if you're sitting, in that waiting room surrounded by your fears, you need something that is more interesting to talk to than your fears.
Mm-hmm.
So I call it filling up the spirit bucket, which is like, allowing yourself to do things that you love, that light you up, that make you smile, anything that you can possibly get excited about, and it's like, when you're doing like you're releasing all these big projects at the moment, I'm sure you've got loads of fears surrounding them, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
But hopefully your excitement about them is slightly bigger than your fears. So you can be like, oh yeah, I've got this fear of this, but I'm so excited to share this with people. It's like you've got that, and I say it's making your will bigger than your won't. Whereas if that spirit bucket is empty, because we've perhaps not been allowing ourselves to do anything that gives us that kind of, lit up feeling, then it's much harder to pull ourselves away from the fears, because we don't have that kind of shining thing, kind of that, that little thread that leads us away. So as much of a stressful life or a busy life as we're leading, we really must allow ourselves to put in the diary things that make us smile, whatever they may be, because it's like that thing that gets in that spirit bucket. So when that spirit bucket, when you really need that spirit bucket to come into action, it's it's half full and you've got something there to help you. So it's and that's the thing, because when we're very surrounded by fear, we might not have something to pull us out. So you can see that as kind of a way that you can actively help yourself, to have this kind of, benefit of your kind of positive, side of yourself that you've been kind of plumping up, that can be like, yeah, okay, you're afraid of that, but what about this? What about this thing? And it's like, okay, and then, it can gently lead us. And, everything is a practice, like, I've been practicing the things, that I do for my own mind, kind of every day for like 13 years. So now I'm like, okay, I've got this, I understand it, and it makes sense to me. But it doesn't mean that I don't get anxious or have fears. It's just I know what to do when they're there.
Right.
And, I still have a difficult time and really go through something, but I feel confident that I'm going to be okay. It's just those little subtle differences between not knowing that you'll be okay. And of course, hindsight is our greatest joy as well, because, whoever we are, we can always remember a time in the past where we had a shit day or a difficult experience, and the fact that we're here today means we did go through it, so we will be able to again.
I just really appreciate everything that you just shared with us, and it just reminded me that even doing this, like even all of these interviews that I've been, getting onto Skype for is like, not that it's a new thing for me, but it definitely is. It does take me a bit out of my comfort zone. Once I'm in the conversation, then I feel in flow and I feel good, but it's actually just getting there and getting on the phone, you know? So I actually have, my spirit bucket is like surrounding me right now. I've got like 2 tarot cards that I had pulled for that sit next to me, you know, right next to the computer. I've got the Ace of Wands and the Ace of Pentacles, so they feel really good in my heart. And then from the Miracles Now deck, I share my light with the world. And so that's, you know, and I have a little affirmation that I say before every call. Like I think it was from a book that I was reading called The Big Leap. And it really resonated with me. And it's something like, every day I'm expanding in love, success, and abundance, and inspiring others to do the same, you know? And these calls, it's like the connection with someone else, yourself, and the other wonderful ladies I've been talking to. It's like, this is our opportunity to share this light with the world. And that's bigger than whether I'm anxious about talking to someone or not.
Yeah.
You know, so I get it. I get exactly what you're saying. It's like, that was me preempting that I was going to get anxious about it, and preemptively filling the bucket. So when I sit down in the chair, it's all around me, and it's like, right, take a sip of water, make the call.
And it's, you know, and it especially, you know, when it comes to anybody who's working, you know, who wants to be of service in some way, whatever it is, you know, whether you're an actress or a therapist, you know, the thing that, you know, it's kind of just what you were saying, you know, it's like you're appreciating that the work that you want to do is more important than your fears about it. And, you know, that's where we get to step in that place where, you know, we recognise that it's you know, it's not about us. You know, like I always have the same anxiety. So if I'm going to do a talk for people or something, you know, I'm like, my fears might be kind of going, hey, what if nobody likes your outfit? Or what if they think you're stupid, right? Those are all the natural what ifs that come in. But then I'm like, Lou, get out of your own way. This isn't about you, you know, like you're here, it's because there's one person at least in this room that needs you. And that's where the focus has to be, you know, on helping that one person via, you know, I always say my kind of intention is that one person will read one line and that it will help them, you know, it's like onto that one person that needs you, gets you out of your head, you know, that's kind of wonder whether people think you're cool or whatever, and it's like, it's not about that, you know, this, if you're wanting to share something with the world, it's because, you know, you somewhere in you've got a bigger purpose for it, and you know, whilst your ego may want validation for it, your soul really just wants to help people. So, you know, I, even just as a mantra, you know, I before I do anything, I'll just be like, get out of your way.
I love that you just said like one person too, because I think for me, my experience as an entrepreneur is like things can be, even within myself, it can be really numbers driven. Like, but I feel like in being numbers driven, you lose focus of that one person, you know? Like
about likes or follows or all that stuff. And
right.
And it's good, even if you do a visual. I was doing this with a client yesterday who, you know, she's working on a fashion project. And we were talking about that sense of, you know, releasing things to the world and how it feels and worrying whether people like them. And I was like, you know, why don't you visualize the one person, right? Who is that girl that wants to buy your product, you know? Or, you know, it's like you, like, who is that one person that you want to help? You know, it's like, how old are they? What do they do? What, you know, what's their stance on life? What do they believe in? What are their fears? You know, if you visualize that person, you can even just see that person when you're doing your work, and you're like, even if you want to give them a name, you can be like, this is for Sarah. You know, and you're honed in on that kind of real.
Sarah's gonna love this.
Sarah's gonna love this, and it takes you also back into your authentic place. That's not like, oh, I hope I get like, you know, 100 likes on this picture, you know, which is so irrelevant. It's like, you know, 100 likes doesn't, you know, and of course we're in a world where, you know, that has got caught up. But it's like, especially if you look at social media, it's like, you know, 1,000 likes means nothing compared to one comment of someone saying that really helped me.
Yeah.
Or I really needed that. You know, those are the things that are actually, you know, uplifting you and fueling your work and changing the world. So it's like, you know, take it back to that one person, because, you know, I'd rather have one person that felt like something I had done had helped them than care about 10,000 people who don't like me.
Yeah.
No, because I'm like, if someone doesn't like your work or doesn't resonate with it, it just means that you're not for them. It's nothing to do with you, you know. And it's like, but there's someone out there, Sarah, who's like desperately needs your help, and it's like, do it for her, you know. And I think that's kind of a cool way to take it back to present, you know.
Yeah.
To get yourself out of your head and be like, oh yeah, okay, back to that one person.
Yeah, sweet. Well, I've already taken up a lot of your time, and this has been an awesome conversation. I feel like we're just scratching the surface. We could probably go on for like hours and hours after this, but I'm gonna like bring it back and cut it off. But I do have a last like silly little question, and it's do you have a favorite tarot card, or like one that comes up and you just feel so good in your heart because you just love the message of it?
That's such a good question, because I feel like it changes the whole time.
You can pick more than one. I actually have two, which I'll share with you afterwards.
I always have a special kind of love for the Death card and the Tower card, because they're these cards of change, and, you know, the Death card is the card for Scorpio, so it's you know, my card, and you know, I suppose those transformational ones, even the Fool as well, like, I love them because, you know, I see that one of humans' biggest fears is change and the unknown.
Yeah.
Yet I'm constantly going back to this, you know, knowledge that we have is that we're humans, and that we were actually designed to evolve. You know, that's actually what we're here to do. You know, we know that from evolution.
Yeah.
And so it's like, actually change is our natural state. So I believe that if we can master the art of embracing change, not being afraid of it, feeling okay about the unknown, knowing that it's okay to be scared of it, that's our superpower. So, you know, any of those cards that are kind of change driven, you know, and especially the Tower, you know, people are scared of the Tower, and I'm like, the Tower is like this it's an empowered chance to make changes in your life, you know. It's this catalyst. So they're always my favorites, but I do feel like, you know, I especially like working on the ones that I find difficult. Like this week, I do a weekly video for the Numinous as well, and it just went up today, and the card was the Seven of Cups. And I've had, you know, it's one of those cards that I never really liked that much, because of course the ones you don't like that much are the ones that teach you the most.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it comes up a lot, you know, for me, not so much now, it used to a lot in the past, because it's very representative of illusion, you know.
Is that the one in the Rider-Waite that's like, he's kind of looking at it and he doesn't really want the cup? He's like a bit dissatisfied.
That's the Four of Cups, I think.
Okay.
So the Six of Cups is where there's kind of someone's like lying on the floor, and there's loads of chaos, and there's all these cups with different things coming out.
Oh, yep.
Yeah. You know, it can be when we're very overwhelmed, but it's very much about illusion. So it always would come up for me when I got myself locked in like Neverland. You know, like it taken my kind of daydreaming to a negative place where I was just not doing anything, and I was kind of, you know, it would come up maybe when I, you know, had a crush or something, and I was like just lost in kind of imagining stuff and completely neglecting actual day-to-day life, you know, and so I would get annoyed with it, because it would always be like, oh, what illusions, you know, you can't see clearly. You know, I've seen it come up for clients where it's been like, oh, just there's a lot of opinions happening around you and you can't see clearly, you know, it's that like misty vision. And, you know, in this week's scope I was talking about it, and I was like, how about we just use this as a chance to bash down our own illusions, so you can actually check in with like, what stories are you telling yourself that are totally, you know, total bullshit, you know, what illusions have you built up about yourself that aren't even true, you know. I was like, let's empower this sense of being like, oh, I'm going to get the cloth and clear the mist, you know, off the screen, and then I'll be able to see clearly.
Oh, cool.
So,
and I'll share those links with everyone so they can, you know, get to your tarot scopes and watch the videos, and really I'll be sharing like all links to your work and things like that too.
What's your favorite card?
I've got two. One of my favorites is the Two of Wands.
Oh yeah, that's like a standard favorite of mine.
Yeah, because I'm such a huge traveler, and I do love change and newness, and I feel like for me it's always like, it's the card that portends that adventure is about to start for me. Yeah. Or some new adventure is coming up.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a card that when you see it, you definitely do get that feeling of like, oh yes, because you know, the 2 and the 3 of Wands, they're very expansive.
Yeah.
They kind of make you like, ah.
Yeah, I get a bit giddy. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, okay. And then my second is, my standard favorite is the Empress, because I always receive the Empress when I'm like in a fully aligned state. And it's actually the card that I remind myself, I don't want to say like to aspire to be, but to remind myself that is actually my powerful feminine nature, my deep sexuality, moving from a place of just like being out in nature, like everything that brings me, like dancing, things like that, like things that bring me to what I feel like is the true expression of myself. I see reflected back in the Empress card, and whenever I'm in that space, like she shows up, and I go like, "Fuck yeah!" Like I'm doing it. I'm in it.
That's cool though, because it's also, you know, it's also brilliant how the cards are so unique to us and at different times of our lives.
Yeah.
They kind of mean different things, or they represent different things. You know, you get something different from them. Like I can be like, oh yeah, I remember like 10 years ago that card totally meant that thing.
Yeah, or that person even.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, that would always come up in relation to that person in my life, and now, it's something different.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, it's been so nice to chat with you.
You too.
I really appreciate it. So there you have it, folks. Don't forget to sign up for your bonuses today over at youryearofradicaltransformation.com/day1. So head over there or check your email that this recording came in, and make sure that you grab your bonus for today. Speak to you soon. Bye.